Picture this, you can earn 5,000 Ghana cedis a month. That's not bad money. That's actually above what most people in this country take home. You work hard, you show up, you do this for 10 years straight, and at the end of it, you sit down and look at what you actually have, and it's almost nothing. You can earn 5,000 Ghana cedis a month, work for 10 years, and still have almost nothing to show for it. So where does the money go? Is it because Ghanaians don't work hard enough, or is there something deeper preventing ordinary people or Ghanaians from turning income into wealth? That's what we are digging in today. It's not the easy answer. People just don't manage money well, but the actual system underneath it. We are going to look at income, spending, debt, inflation, what people actually know about money, the family and the social pressure that shapes every decision, investing, and who really owns businesses and assets in this country. Because here's the real question underneath all of it. Why do so many people earn money but struggle to build lasting wealth? Let's start with the first 10 almost nobody separates in their head, even though it's the whole ball game. Earning money and having wealth are not the same thing. They feel the same because both involve cedis, but they behave completely differently. Income is what flows in every month. Wealth is what's left standing after everything else has taken its cut. Income is a river. Wealth is a dam that actually holds some of that water back. Here's the question that should bother you. If two people earn the same salary, why can one become wealthy while the other remains financially vulnerable? Same income, same country, same inflation, same cost of fufu and transport, and yet 10 years later, one of them owns a small rental property or shares in a business or land that's tripled in value, and the other one is still starting from zero every single month. That gap isn't about who works harder. Both of them are earning the same salary, which means both are already working. The gap is about what happens to the money after it lands. That's what the rest of this video is actually about, because after it lands part is where most Ghanaians lose the game, long before they even realize they are playing it. Let's start with the most obvious pressure, the one everybody feels but few people can actually explain with numbers. By early 2026, Ghana's inflation rate had dropped to around 3%, one of the lowest readings in almost 3 decades. The cedi had strengthened. The Bank of Ghana was calling it a genuine turnaround, and on paper, that is real and it's worth acknowledging. But here's what almost never makes the headline. Falling inflation doesn't mean prices come back down. It means prices are rising more slowly than before. The tomatoes, the transport fare, the school fees that tripled during the crisis years, they didn't reset. They just stopped climbing as fast. You are still paying crisis era prices. You don't feel the shock every month anymore. And it's not just food and transport. Rent in the cities keeps climbing. Utility bills, light, water eat a bigger share of the budget than they used to. Healthcare can swallow an entire month's income in a single bad diagnosis, because for most people, there is no insurance standing between them and the full bill. Well, we'll come back to that. Underneath the recovery headlines is a much less comfortable number. Even with all this improvement, roughly a third of the country is still living close to the poverty line. Stability at the top of the economy doesn't automatically show up in somebody's chop money. The national minimum wage in Ghana sits at just under 22 cedis a day right now, a little over 600 cedis a month if you work every single day. Officially, the average salary is somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 cedis a month, but average lie, the median income, what a genuinely typical worker takes home right in the middle of the pack, is closer to 1,000 cedis a month. That massive gap between average and typical tells you everything. A small number of high earners are dragging the average upward, while most people are nowhere near it. And remember, more than 80% of Ghana's workforce isn't even in a salaried job. No pay slip, no fixed contract, no predictable month. Trading, farming, driving, hustling, income that moves up and down with the market, the weather, the traffic. So before anyone even talks about saving or investing, most Ghanaians are already spending nearly everything they earn just to stay fed, housed, and moving. It's not a spending problem, that's arithmetic, which brings us to something a lot of people quietly blame themselves for, but that's not the full story either. Lifestyle inflation, the new phone, the car, the clothes for the event, sending money to family every month even when your own account is thin, weddings, funerals. It's easy and lazy to look at this and say, Ghanaians just love to spend. We are not going to do that here. Instead, let's ask the harder question. Why do these spending patterns exist in the first place? Take funerals. A typical funeral in this country can cost anywhere from 20,000 cedis, well over 100,000 for an ordinary family. That can be more than a full year's income spent in a single weekend. Why would anyone do that? Because in a lot of communities, a funeral isn't really about the deceased. It's a public statement about the family that is still alive. Bury your relative modestly and people will talk, not about grief, about shame. So families borrow, they sell things, they go into debt for years to avoid a different kind of cost, being seen as the family that didn't do it well. Weddings run on a similar logic. The ceremony has to look a certain way because it's not just a celebration, it's a public signal about the family standing. The same reasoning runs underneath supporting the extended family. In a country where formal pensions barely reach most people and insurance covers almost nobody, family is the safety net. You send money home not because you are bad with money. You send it because if your income ever stops, that same network is what catches you. It's not carelessness, it's an informal insurance system and everybody is quietly paying premiums into it. We actually touched on this before on this channel. The way wealth gets performed in public, even by people who don't have much of it to say. Because when there's no formal system protecting you, looking successful can feel just as urgent as being successful. Appearing stable attracts help, trust, businesses, marriage prospects, respect in a system with no safety net. Image isn't vanity, it's strategy. None of that makes this expense easy to escape. It just means the real problem isn't that people spend badly, it's that they are operating inside a system where visible spending is doing a job that informal institutions in richer countries usually do instead. But there is one more trap in the middle of all this, and it's the one that turns pressure into a hole that keeps getting bigger, deeper. Around 1 in 5 Ghanaian adults has taken a loan through mobile money. That number keeps climbing because these loans are fast. They don't ask many questions. And when they are short before month end, fast beats cheap every time. Here's the part that should genuinely alarm you. Some of these mobile loans charge interest of 15%, even 25%, not a year, a month. Borrow 1,000 cedis, miss the repayment window by 30 days, you can already owe 1,300 cedis or more. Stretch that out and the math turns vicious fast. Over 2 million Ghanaians take out one of these loans every single quarter. It's not just mobile loans either. Regular bank loans carry real weight too, built from the central bank's benchmark rate plus a premium that can push ordinary personal loans well into double-digit annual interest. Credit here in almost every form is expensive, and when a chunk of next month's income is already promised to this month's loan before you've even earned it, you are not just broke today, you are pre-spending tomorrow. Debt doesn't just cost you money, it costs you time, because when you end up working, pay for a version of last month that's already gone. This isn't really a story about people being reckless. It's a story about what happens when emergency cash is one tap away and a real emergency fund is nowhere in sight. When you have no cushion, the loan app isn't a trap you walked into recklessly. It's often the only door available, which leads to the question underneath everything so far. If the cost of living is high, spending pressure is real, and debt is this easy to fall into, why doesn't the system just teach people to avoid it? That's the next piece. Quick honest question. Do you know exactly how compound interest works? Could you explain in one sentence why 5% inflation quietly shrinks money sitting in a drawer? Do you know what your pension actually is, who is contributing to it, or whether you have one at all? For most Ghanaians, the honest answer is no, and that's not really their fault because personal finance was rarely, if ever, taught to them properly. It's not on most school curriculums. It's not something most families sit down and explain because a lot of parents were never taught either. The Bank of Ghana itself has openly acknowledged this is a problem. In 2026, they've been running financial literacy campaigns in senior high schools across the country, teaching students about responsible borrowing, the real risks behind the mobile loans, what happens when you guarantee someone else's loan, and how to spot a scam before it empties your account. The fact that the central bank is starting this education at the senior high level tells you something important. This isn't a personal failure, it's a national gap, and the institutions themselves are only now trying to close it. The gap shows up everywhere you look. Insurance, the tool specifically designed to stop one bad event from wiping out a family, harvests a tiny sliver of the economy here. Penetration has been stuck at around 1% for years. Pensions barely reach the more than 80% of the workforce that works informally. And then here is tax. VAT is baked into almost everything you buy, whether you notice it or not. But ask people, how do the tax system actually work, or what a small business actually owns, you will get a shrug. Nobody sat most people down and explain any of this. Most people can tell you the price of rice down to the pesewa. Ask them to explain risks, diversification, or why an asset beats cash sitting under the mattress and the room goes quiet. This is what a knowledge gap actually costs. It's not just missed opportunity. It's paying more in interest than you needed to, buying insurance that doesn't fit, or walking past a legitimate investment because it sounds exactly like the last scam that took someone else's money. Which brings us to the actual mechanics of building wealth, and where most Ghanaians are and aren't putting their money. Here's the real question at the center of this entire video. What are ordinary Ghanaians actually buying that can increase in value or produce income while they sleep, while they work, while life happens around it? Let's go through the list. Cash and mobile money balances are convenient, but inflation eats them quietly every single day. They just sit there. Savings accounts are typical interest rates, barely keep pace with the cost of living, sometimes not even that. Land is the one asset almost every Ghanaian instinctively trust, and there's no real logic behind that. Lots that sold for a new 1,000 cedis in the 1990s can be worth hundreds of thousands today, but land has real friction most people don't talk about. It needs real capital upfront. It's slow to convert back to cash if you ever needed it, and huge share of land in this country still isn't properly registered, which means the one asset everybody trusts can also be the one somebody disputes or loses years later. Businesses and productive equipment, a sewing machine, a taxi, a shop, stock, can generate income that doesn't depend on trading hours for cedis one for one, but they need starting capital, real businesses knowledge, and access to affordable credit to grow, and that's still hard for the average person to come by. Stocks barely register at all. The Ghana Stock Exchange was actually one of the best performing markets in Africa in recent years, with returns north of 50% in a single year. But ask around, and almost nobody you know owns a single share. Government bonds and treasury bills are the safer, steadier pushing of stocks. Ghana has an entire fixed income market built for exactly this, and it still barely registers with ordinary savers, mostly because almost nobody's ever explained that every day people can buy into, not just banks and big institutions. And pensions brings us to a genuinely encouraging data point buried in all of this. Over 8 in 10 Ghanaian adults now have some kind of financial account. That's actually one of the highest rates in the entire region, behind only Kenya, Mauritius, and Mauritius. Access to the financial system isn't really the bottleneck anymore. But here's the catch. Having an account and knowing what to build with it are two completely different things. Access got solved, usage didn't. Most of those accounts hold cash that sits there losing value instead of moving into anything that grows. So when you ask what ordinary Ghanaians are actually buying that can increase in value or produce income, the next answer for most people is almost nothing. Not because they don't want to, because between the cost of living, the spending pressure, the debt, and the knowledge gap, there is really anything left to buy it with, and really anyone who show them how. Which brings us to the part of this video where we stop describing the problem and start describing the way. This is not a video about how Ghanaians are poor. That's the lazy ending, and it's not even true. It's a video about how income, spending, debt, and wealth are 4 completely different systems that most people were never taught to separate, let alone manage on purpose. So what does an actual way out look like? Not a slogan, a sequence. Increase income, even a little. Control expenses, not by cutting everything, but by knowing exactly where the leaks are. Eliminate the destructive debt first, the mobile loans charging 15% a month before anything else. Build even a small emergency fund so the next emergency doesn't force you back into another loan. Then and only then, start acquiring assets that can actually produce something. Land bought with eyes open, a stake in a business, a pension contribution, shares, anything that works while you are not. Invest consistently, not once, then increase income again, because now you've got a foundation that can actually hold the extra money instead of leaking it straight back out. It's not a loop, it's a finish line. And the encouraging part is that some of the groundwork is already being laid. Ghana already has one of the highest rates of financial amount ownership in the region. That's the real infrastructure already built. The Bank of Ghana is already pushing financial education into schools. Inflation for now has calmed down. None of that fixes anything on its own, but it means the foundation for millions of ordinary Ghanaians to actually do this isn't fantasy. It's closer than it's ever been. What's missing isn't opportunity, it's the knowledge and the system to actually use it. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. Maybe the problem isn't that Ghanaians don't work hard. The problem is that working hard, earning an income, and building both are 3 completely different things. You can max out all 3, work brutally hard, earn decent money, and still end up with nothing. If nobody ever showed you how the third one actually works, the goal isn't simply to make more money, it's to turn income into assets and assets into financial freedom. So here's the question I will leave you with, and I want you to actually sit with this one, not just nod at it. If your income stopped tomorrow, how long could your wealth keep you going? For most people watching this, is the honest answer is uncomfortable, but an uncomfortable answer today is a lot cheaper than the same answer in 20 years. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, actually understanding the systems behind the problems we all just live inside, that's exactly what this channel is for. We are not here to tell you Ghana is broken. We are here to trace why things are the way they are and what a real way forward looks like. So if you want to keep digging into how this country economy actually works for real people, not just headlines, hit subscribe and turn notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if this one landed for you, send it to somebody who needs to hear it, because the whole point of this thing is figuring it out together. And I will see you in the next one.